Well, I'll tell you what, friends, it's a good thing that football is not a beauty contest because Syracuse would have been eliminated a long time ago. And somebody else, Miss California, or in this case, Miss Virginia, would have won this one. What an ugly game. But a win it is for Syracuse football, despite 4 turnovers by the Orange, despite 12 penalties by the Orange. Virginia chipped in with 12 penalties of their own. It was ugly. It was chippy. It was a game you felt a little bit of dread because Syracuse just couldn't punch it in the end zone in the first half. All these drives ending in field goals, but Virginia's missing field goals, but they didn't get a chance to hit a last field goal. Syracuse gets a field goal, but Virginia has enough time on the clock. After Syracuse can't burn the clock, it was just one thing after the other. But you know what, friends? As they say, a win is a win. And Syracuse takes down Virginia. Final score at the JMA Wireless Dome tonight. Syracuse 22, Virginia 20. Your comments and questions, of course, welcome throughout. There's some issues Syracuse is going to have to work out here. And it's a good thing they got a get-right game next week because here's the thing, folks. This is a 4-0 football team. First 4-0 team since the 2018 team that ended up 10-3 4 years ago. They're going to get to 5-0. This team will beat Wagner next week, and they'll be 5-0 for the first time in 1987. That's the last time Syracuse won its first 5 games in a season. They went undefeated. So this team certainly didn't play like that. I mean, that 87 team certainly had some stumbles along the way here, but the old expression goes, you can't spell survives without SU. They didn't really survive this game. They got bailed out by their defense, and someone had to win this thing. Frankly, it was a football game. Both teams deserved to lose. If they gave both teams a loss, I actually would have been good with that because it was just a brutal, brutal football game, but win it, they did. So let's highlight some of your comments. Then we'll jump and give you some stats and keep the commentary going here. As Iris says, by the seat of their pants, but a win is a win. Danny brought up some injuries. A lot of injuries on that Syracuse defense tonight. That's going to be concerning. Danny brings it up here. The offensive line needs some help, and I am bewildered by that. This is an offensive line that's got a few 300-pounders now and should not have struggled as much as it did against the 81st ranked run defense in the country. Illinois, the fighting Tommy DeVitos, ran all over this Virginia team. Old Dominion last week ran all over this Virginia team, yet Syracuse with Sean Tucker could not. Tucker came up with some big runs at the end. You got to give him credit for that, but he struggled once again. Another scare as Tucker went down in this game, was hurt, had to go to the sideline, ended up coming back. Second time this year that was the case. But boy, as it is said here by Mary Ellen, a win is a win. So glad they pulled it out. Good night, everyone. Mary Ellen's going to bed already. I don't blame you. It's late here on a Friday night on the East Coast, but wherever you're watching from today on the vast internet out there, we're on the Syracuse football Facebook page. We're on Syracuse YouTube Sports, and we're on Twitter as well. And it's all thanks to our friends at Krause Health. Allison says, I think Syracuse was overconfident and unprepared coming into this game as a 10-point favorite. I love Schrader, but he has to learn to throw the ball away. As Kevin notes here, glad to have Schmidt back in Lou Groza award-winning form. Yeah, they needed every one of those points for Andre Schmidt to come back. And it's funny because a buddy of mine texted me before the game, and he was field level, and he told me that Schmidt was struggling in warm-ups. I wonder if Schmidt will end up talking about that in postgame. And, you kind of make a note of it, but he did not struggle when it mattered most. That guy came out and booted 5 field goals, and Syracuse needed every single one of them. Jerry says, grinding out wins. No quit in that team, right? Yvonne says, nice job, Cuse. Jermaine says, another miracle for the Syracuse defense. Stepped up when it's needed. And look, that Syracuse defense struggled last week. Aiden O'Connell picked them apart, threw for 424 yards. They got pressure on Brennan Armstrong. Yep, Virginia certainly made some plays in the second half, but that Syracuse defense, time and time again. How great was Garrett Williams tonight? Shutting down that team with the interception. Eric Coley bats away the pass at the end. Caleb Okechukwu getting a sack when it was needed. I mean, that defense just time and again stepped up when it was needed. and shut down Virginia and did it right at the end, 4th and 4. And Virginia's got a chance. And I remember last week, Brennan Armstrong did the same thing, led Virginia up in what was a low-scoring, ugly game against Old Dominion, but put them in field goal position, and they won the football game. Their field goal kicker misses 2 in the first quarter, right? But Syracuse kept coming up empty. Now, Syracuse has been one of the best red zone scoring teams in the country this year. That streak continues because they did score when they were in the red zone. They just didn't put up enough touchdowns. And you could just tell that Syracuse was doing all it could to keep Virginia in the game. Virginia took advantage of that, certainly in the second half, but they had to put a drive together when needed. Syracuse caught a break for all the penalties that they had. There was a face mask on Garrett Schrader and what looked like was going to be a stalling drive there, a drive-ending sack by Virginia, keeps it going the other way, and Syracuse gets a field goal out of that drive as well and wins the football game. Another one you want to forget about, folks. Why force the run all game? The passing game was good from Antonio. I was surprised that Robert and I didn't go more off tackle, didn't try some different things. I don't think Tucker's 100%, and then he got banged up fully again. He looks like he's got some kind of lower leg injury here. He just can't get the drive he needs. He can't get to the outside. The offensive line had a terrible game, guys. There's just no way around this. Now, Schrader's got to learn to throw the football away, but he was under pressure more than he needed to be. They couldn't clear running lanes for Tucker. A lot of holding, a lot of procedure calls. That offensive line, which surprised me because of, just today, Mel Kiper Jr. put out his big board, latest big board. There's Matthew Bergeron on it as one of the top 5 tackles in the country, and he certainly is. But even he struggled at times in this game. You've got 300-pounders on this offensive line. It just shouldn't be playing as poorly as it is with the experience that it has, the great coaching that it has. I think Mike Schmidt has, for the most part, done a great job with this offensive line. And when you have an all-world running back, all you got to do is just clear enough of a path for this guy, and he's going to hit home runs for you. And second game in a row, that has not been the case. Even with only 60 yards, he only needed 11 tonight. Tucker did pass Ernie Davis, heard of that guy, and he's now the 12th leading rusher in Syracuse history. So as you guys continue to discuss a few things in the comments, let's look at some stats from this one. We mentioned the penalties. Syracuse finished with 12 penalties for 91 yards. Virginia, 12 penalties for 105 yards. The thing is, Syracuse had the ball in this game for 34 minutes and 50 seconds. They held the ball a bunch. They just couldn't put enough touchdowns, especially in the red zone. They were terrible on third down, 6 of 16. Virginia was worse, 3 of 12. Again, speaks to the great performance that the defense had in this game. So all told, Syracuse ran 71 plays for 352 yards. That's an average of just under 5 yards a play. Virginia, 67 plays, 287 yards. Looking at some individual numbers here, Brennan Armstrong, 19 of 38, threw a pick, 138 yards and a touchdown. He was sacked 4 times. It felt like more than that. He was under pressure throughout the game. Certainly Syracuse did a much better job with him than they did with Aiden O'Connell last week from Purdue. And why wouldn't you when you had Robert and I and Jason Beck, his former offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, now on the Syracuse sideline. Looking at things from a Syracuse standpoint, Schrader, 22 of 33, an interception. He did not throw a touchdown in this game. He was sacked 6 times. So just ugly display by the Syracuse offensive line tonight. Aronde Gadsden was a bright spot, a lone bright spot in this game. 7 catches, 113 yards. I don't even consider that guy a tight end anymore. He just gets open. He's a receiver, tight end hybrid of some sort, and he has become the top target. Nice to see Trevor Pena back out there for Syracuse. Had a great kickoff return to start the game. The Orange, ironically enough, actually started this game with a great offensive drive, thanks to Pena, who had 2 catches for 41 yards. Tucker had 5 catches for 39 yards, had a big 15-yard catch and run late in the game for the Orange. And we mentioned Tucker, 21 carries for 60 yards in this game. Schrader, 14 carries, just 11 yards on the day. He lost a bunch of yards on a sack in the fourth quarter. Again, throw the ball away, Garrett. Don't run that far back. I mean, as much strides as Garrett Schrader has made this year, he made some freshman mistakes out there for an experienced quarterback. The competitiveness, I think, in him gets the best of him sometimes. There were 4 or 5 occasions where just get rid of the ball. He had like that chest pass thing to Courtney Jackson. He ends up fumbling the ball. it was a mess all over. So when you look at what happened individually tonight, you got to look on the defensive side of the ball. Mikael Jones with 8 tackles, Deuce Chestnut with 5 tackles, Marlowe Wax, great game. Unfortunately, there were some injuries on the defensive side, so we'll have to get some updates on that. Barron was thrown out for a ridiculous targeting call in the sense that Virginia didn't get called for targeting on a play on the kickoff when they stripped Trevor Pena of the ball. I mean, that's textbook targeting. Why is this so arbitrary, these targeting calls? Nick Jackson for Virginia ended up getting a clear targeting call late because he hit Schrader in the helmet, so I guess it balanced out a little bit, but they've got to figure out this targeting thing. It's so objective, and I get why it's so arbitrary. I mean, and I get what they're trying to do, make the game safer and everything and deter people from leading with their helmet, but that was a textbook targeting on Trevor Pena, and that didn't get called. So I don't know what you're doing out there. Garrett Williams was just phenomenal in this football game, and there were 21 NFL scouts at this game. I think it was 27 scouts representing 21 teams, as my colleague Emily Liker tweeted earlier. He was all over the place, breaking up passes, had an interception, and just a lot of plays that don't show up in the box score, but he's all over, breaking up passes. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better day from Garrett Williams. What a performance from him tonight. I think he's the MVP of this football game. I would put Gadsden up there too, and maybe a couple other names you can sell me on, but man, that defense time and again just had to bail his team out. And that was the opposite of last week because they gave up a bunch of yards and held on by the hair on their chinny chin chin. You know, Ochukwu had the pick 6 to put Syracuse up 10 last week, but that defense just gave up way too many big plays. And I said that here on the postgame show last week. Deuce Chestnut too, Dan, making a great point, making some great plays in the fourth quarter in particular. And I said it here on the postgame, and I wrote it in my column that when that defense watched the film of the Purdue game, they were going to cringe at some of the pass plays they gave up, some of the coverage they gave up. That tightened right up tonight. Armstrong under pressure all night. And that's a guy that can scramble. Aiden O'Connell for Purdue, you know, it would take him all night to run across this room I'm sitting in, right? Whereas Armstrong is mobile and he can get out of trouble, but they had pressure on him all night. Great job by this defense tonight. Danny with a great question too. Was that a safety? I thought it was a safety. I don't know why it wasn't called a safety. I think technically they rule the play dead where the tackle is initiated, and I think it was initiated on the 1 yard line, but give me a break. That's a safety. You know, some of these technicalities in football and some of these rules they have, I mean, give me a freaking break. That was a safety, right? So not a stellar night for these ACC officials either. I mean, Syracuse certainly walked in to its own problems, as we mentioned on the offensive line, but that was a safety. That was a targeting on Trevor Pena. I mean, these guys, they had a tough night, but you take the win, right? As Glenn says, tough game, not pretty. Take the win and learn, get healthy, and look forward to NC State. Yeah, you hope next week, get right game, get the players that matter off the field by the second half and roll Wagner and go into your bye week and get healthy. And what a showdown that's going to end up being with NC State. We'll see if NC State can hold up their end of the bargain and be undefeated when they match up in a few weeks. But Syracuse will be, because they're going to beat Wagner next week and they're going to be 5-0. Think about that, guys. As frustrating as some details of this game are, they go in as a win and this team's going to be 5-0. And nobody saw that coming before the season. Even, you know, family members and Dino Babers in his wildest dreams did not see a 5-0 football team. And 2 weeks in a row, I mean, folks, this team is 4-0 and just as easily could have 2 losses on the board because of how Purdue went last week and how this game went today. But, you know, good teams just find a way in these situations. And Syracuse found a way. The way was their defense in this game. Last week, it was a combination of everything in a wild fourth quarter. This one was just a chippy, ugly, someone's got to win it game. And Syracuse won it. And shout out to the special teams, as Jerry points out here. Pena with the kickoff return, Schmidt with all the field goals. No question about it. No question about it. Andrew slightly disagrees with you and says the defense won the game. Penalties on offense. Need to learn from this one. The offense has hard practice coming up this week. Matt agrees that the non-safety was a horrible call. It really was. I don't get how you replay that and say that that's not a safety. I mean, why are you trying to save the quarterback there? It was it was a safety. I can't get over that. That just drives me wild. You guys are going fast and furious here. Great commentary from you. I can barely keep up with you, and that's a good thing. Cody brings up an interesting point. First in FBS, least turnovers had what, 4 or 5 today, and now they're like number 30. Yeah, Cody, they came into this game. They had not committed a turnover all season. They had 6 takeaways on the year. So the takeaways continued in key spots for Syracuse. But yeah, they made up for lost time in the turnover department. Tucker got stripped of the ball. We mentioned the Pena one. That shouldn't have been a turnover because that was a targeting call, but went down as a turnover. Courtney Jackson probably stunned at the fact that Schrader got him the football on that chest pass, drops the ball. Replay, that replay was actually accurate. Fumble. And then Schrader had a pick in this game as well. Just one of those nights, man. Just one of those nights. My goodness. Football, not a beauty contest, friends. Not a beauty contest. Matt says, still surprised at how many empty seats there are. Come on, Syracuse. Let's support our boys. Yeah, Friday night's tough. A lot of high school football out there. Tough for people to get there. I have not seen the attendance as of yet. Everything I heard before the game was it was going to be around 38,000, 39 or so. Maybe could creep up to 40, depending on if the student showed up. Crowd was great. They did not get a fun football game to watch. But when they needed to on those 4th downs, those 3rd downs, supporting that defense, pushing them ahead, the crowd, what it ended up being, and I don't have the number right here in front of me, guys, was certainly fantastic once again. And you got Wagner next week, bye week, NC State. Purdue, this team's been home now for a while and will be home for the next couple of weeks with a bye week thrown in there. So if you didn't get on board for Purdue, if you didn't get on board for this one, and frankly, how that game turned out. At least they won, right? At least you got your value there as a fan if you went to this game. But for those that haven't seen this team play, I mean, you got Wagner, good opportunity to go see the team play. Maybe get some good price tickets, and we'll see what kind of crowd they get for that one. NC State to follow. You got Notre Dame and Florida State on the home slate this year still to come. I think individual game tickets for those just went on sale this past week. I think there's a combo that Syracuse Athletics is putting on for those 2 games. It's a pretty solid home slate this season for Syracuse football. Notre Dame's not as good as we thought they would be. Florida State's off to a good start, but I think that team's beatable. So some pretty good games coming up here. So if you didn't get to some of these early games, there's some juicy games upcoming on the schedule. No doubt about it. Let's see. Cody says, was hoping to see Syracuse hop into the rankings this week, but unless a lot of ranked teams lose, I think they're going to miss out again. I agree with you, Cody. Syracuse had 7 AP votes last week. I used to vote in the AP poll, and just thinking back to how the poll works, how most pollsters do this, I didn't always necessarily do this, but the pattern is you kind of look and see who's in that other receiving votes category. You note teams you vote for, and it's going to be hard to ignore a 4-0 team. It depends on what happens on the bottom of the poll if some teams lose. I don't think this win is going to vault Syracuse in, but there's no way they can ignore a 5-0 team. I don't care that they're only beating Wagner next week. They'll be in the poll next week. They will enter the AP poll at some point. Some people have brought up the possibility that College Game Day would come here if both Syracuse and NC State are undefeated. I don't know. I looked at the slate that week. There's a lot of juicy games. I don't think that's going to be the case, but they're going to be in the poll. I mean, that's going to happen. And if you had asked me before the season if I thought they would enter the AP poll, I would probably say no. I mean, I had this team projected around 6-6. So I didn't really project a top 25 ranking, but they're going to get there. Mike says, tough here. I've seen other ACC schools on Friday nights with full stadiums. The fans wanted a winning team. They got one. Now support the team. Look, there are many reasons fans do go to games, don't go to games. I don't think shaming people is the right strategy to get them to go. You want them to feel like they want to be there. And Mike is right. This team's winning. They're taking care of their end of the bargain. The price is right and everything. But look, I understand. It's tough for some people. The economy is not what it should be for a lot of people, and they're pinching pennies, and that's an expense to go to a game. if you're parents that have kids, you got to get a babysitter and that whole thing. I mean, I sound like I'm making excuses here, and I am in a way, but I get it. I understand that some people it's not as easy for them to go to games. I'll say this though, this team is a desirable product. I mean, the game wasn't very good tonight, but they're 4-0. They're going to be 5-0. They're going to create a buzz that will take care of itself. People will want to go see this team play. If they only go to 1 or 2 games a year, you're going to want to go see Notre Dame. That's going to be a tough ticket because a lot of Notre Dame fans, I think, will be there. Florida State's a good matchup here, right? So people that are in the chat and people that are all about this are football fans, and they can't understand why, people don't center their lives around football. I understand it. I get it. I want to speak up for those people that they're watching the game. They're following the team. They just maybe can't go for whatever reasons they can't go. 39,000 is a good crowd, especially when they're loud and they're into it. Maybe we just got to stop thinking about numbers and just, be happy with the crowd that's there. And they're loud every time they go there. The students have been phenomenal. They're showing up in numbers. They're loud. They're leading the charge in those games. So I don't know. You guys might disagree. You might not like that, but listen, I understand why people don't go. It's tough for some people to get up there and do that, but Syracuse is doing their job. You know what they say? If you win, they will come. They're winning. They're taking care of business, and maybe I'll get some more people to go as we go here. A few more comments from you guys here. Good stuff as always. As I scroll through here, as Jermaine says, chances are game day not coming because NC State plays Clemson before we face them. Yeah, they probably will lose that game. NC State has not been their best so far. I'm waiting for them to kind of click in and play how they're capable of playing. Clemson's getting better. DJ Uiagalelei is playing better. That defense is phenomenal. So they beat Clemson last year. So I'm sure Clemson has revenge on their mind, right? But Tom says it here too. Lee Corso would look great in that Otto costume. I'd love to see how they'd get Lee Corso in the Otto costume, because he's on camera that whole time when they do the pick segment, and he just kind of usually throws the head on there, but that would be fun. They'd have to distract the camera for a minute and get him in the Otto costume, but we're closer to that now than we've been. The last opportunity Syracuse had to be on game day was in 2019, and game day was coming here. That was happening, speaking of Clemson. Problem was Syracuse lost to Maryland the week before, and they didn't just lose to Maryland. They got trucked by Maryland the week before, and poof, game day was gone. They're at least back in the conversation for it, and who would have thought we'd be discussing that this year? Syracuse back in the poll. Game day will at least circle Syracuse and look at Syracuse, be like, hey, can we go to that game? I mean, Notre Dame would have been a possibility if they held up their end of the bargain, but unfortunately, they're not very good this year. But fun conversation to be having, even after a game that wasn't so fun, right? Dan brings it up here. Several key injuries tonight. Hopefully nothing serious. The good news there, Dan, is Lockett's injury looks serious. That knee injury, he was in a lot of pain. We'll see what Clark and some of the other guys that got hurt. Man, who else got hurt out there tonight? It was too many is the answer, right? But let's see here. Clark got helped off the field. Barron got ejected. Carter got hurt. We mentioned Lockett, McDonald, and Thompson, of course, have been hurt for Syracuse. So the good news is you get a get-right game next week against Wagner. You can play your backups and win easily. Bye week and a chance for everybody to get healthy in this one. Mark says, good thing Virginia self-imploded a tad more than Syracuse, as Purdue did last week, right? Like Syracuse they've stubbed their own toe a lot in the last 2 weeks and gotten away with it. You got to admit it, right? As Rob jumps in here and says, Brent, keep thinking to myself, Mike Schmidt knows how to produce a great running game. But Robert and I comes from an air raid background. Can we make the argument that maybe they aren't on the same page yet? Is it possible their backgrounds are just too different and there isn't a middle ground philosophy for them to develop and execute? Rob, I think you bring an interesting perspective to the table. I mean, Anai and Beck's offense is pretty much settled in, and they never had a weapon like Sean Tucker at Virginia. They love having a weapon like Sean Tucker here. I feel like missing Chris Elmore is a big element here. Since Elmore went down, now Tucker had 112 yards against UConn, but Rob, my man, you could have 112 yards against UConn, frankly, right? Since Elmore went down, since the first Tucker injury in the Louisville game aggravated something tonight. My friend Paul Carcaterra, shout out to Carc. Hope you enjoyed your dinner at Santangelo's when coming back into town. Lacrosse legend, but he was on the sidelines tonight. And he mentioned during the broadcast that they were working Tucker's lower left leg. They put like an ointment on it, and he just seems a step slow. So I think he's hurt. I think missing Elmore is a factor, but at the same time, I just don't get why this offensive line is playing as poor as it is. The penalties, the procedures, the holding. We mentioned the size that's on this line, the experience that's on this line. The pass protection was terrible tonight. Virginia's defense wasn't exactly something to write home about. So I don't know, maybe just one of those nights, but it's been a pretty consistent step back for the offensive line this year. And that's a concern because these penalties have got to stop. They had 18 penalties in game one, only had 3 against Connecticut. They had 9 last week against Purdue and 12 in this game. I mean, that's not a good pattern to be in if you're Syracuse penalty wise. So there's something that certainly has to get better. And a bulk of that is on the offensive line. Yet we talk about this, and as Tom says, this team's on its way to a bowl game, right? Which everybody agreed. If they won 6 games and got a bowl game, everybody's good with that. Well, they're 4-0. They're 4-0 with 8 to go. And a bowl game is like in their back pocket now because they're going to be 5-0 and then only have to win 1 game, barring a major collapse. So when do we start to say to ourselves, wait a minute, we got to change the calibration of what we think this football team could be? But there's some concerns. The offensive line's got to get better. Schrader has to look, he's been great this year for the most part, but he's got to know when to get rid of the football. And he was under duress tonight, and that's a guy that can escape the pocket and make some plays happen, but even he couldn't tonight. You got to get Tucker back on track to what Sean Tucker is capable of, right? There's some things to clean up here that not only this game showed, that the Purdue game showed, but we knew that was going to happen, right? The first 2 games, this team was just playing way too good. You just knew, okay, adversity would settle in and some issues would pop up and there would be some things they've got to work on. We mentioned the injuries that are piling up now. So we're starting to get into it here. We're starting to get into the thick of it. And this team is going to kind of see what it's made of here. But they've passed pretty much every test so far, including the most important one. They're 4-0 at this point. So I would love this, Danny. They go to the Fenway Bowl. Let's go. Syracuse football playing in Fenway Park. I know the Yankee fans are all excited because Aaron Judge is chasing history. I believe Albert Pujols got the 700 tonight. I think I saw that in my travels, right? But why not? We've already seen Syracuse play in Yankee Stadium in the Pinstripe Bowl a couple of times. They played Notre Dame at Yankee Stadium, right? Let's go to Fenway Park. Let's play there. Let's see some good sports in Fenway Park this year. And I'm a Red Sox fan, so I can say that. There we go. Kevin with a good point here. NC State's going to be their yardstick. They may or may not be. NC State hasn't really kicked it into gear yet. We'll see how NC State plays against Clemson. By then, we're going to be in the middle of the season, 5-6 games in. Maybe NC State's going to be maybe it's the other way, right? Maybe Syracuse can provide a yardstick to people, but they've got to improve on some of the things that they were lacking in this game and some things that go back to Purdue. But I'll tell you what, I will give the defense a lot of credit because last week they just struggled. They got picked apart, gave up 424 passing yards to O'Connell. This game, they were all over Brendan Armstrong. And boy, you had to be with the intel that Robert and I and Jason Beck brought to the table. I expected that. I expected him to struggle, but yet there's Virginia with the ball in the fourth quarter, driving for what could have been a game-winning field goal. But the defense stepped up again. When you really look at it, when you really look at all the plays this defense made tonight, what a makeup call from last week. And boy, that defense, they better be buying lunch on Monday for that offense, or other way around, the offense for the defense. That defense, shouldn't have to do anything this week. I think the offense should have to carry their pads and do whatever they need to do to pay those guys back because they bailed them out all night long, as a great song once said by, was that Lionel Richie that sang that? We're going almost all night long here. We're 20 minutes from midnight here on the East Coast. Man, that was an ugly game. This ugly football game. But a win is a win, as they say. It was not a beauty contest, friends. And now the Orange get to lay back a little bit, quite literally, for a long weekend. They'll have an easy time against Wagner next week and go 5-0. We'll be here as usual after that game. It's an odd time. It's a 5 o'clock kickoff. It's only on ESPN Plus on ACC Network Extra. So make sure this week, you guys, find ESPN Plus if you don't have it, and make sure you can get the game. Most people have smart TVs now, so you can put that on your television and watch it, but it's not on traditional television per se. It's not on a cable channel. So get that squared away this week. Find ESPN Plus, know how to use it. ACC Network Extra on ESPN Plus, so you can watch the game. That's the only place it's on next week. We'll be here live as usual after the win over Wagner. And I'll call that. It's the only win I'll call all year because they're going to beat that team because that team's terrible and they're a level below Syracuse. And I just can't fathom that Syracuse would lose to a team that Rutgers beat, I believe 66-7 was the final score there. So, yeah, not going to happen, friends. What an advantage for Syracuse, too. They basically have back-to-back bye weeks. And one of those bye weeks counts in the standings against Wagner next week. So what do you say we talk about that game when we get there? We'll end this broadcast for tonight. And thank you guys, as always, for hanging out. We had to grind out that one. That felt like work watching that game. But ultimately, Syracuse wins 22-20. They're 4-0. And some things are bubbling here in Syracuse, New York, and beyond. Orange Nation getting pretty excited about what this football team could be, despite an ugly game that we had to endure tonight. So enjoy your weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Go Bills on Sunday. And we'll talk to you again next week, not only after the Orange take on Wagner. Don't forget Orange Weekly Thursdays at noon Eastern time on these same channels that you're watching. We'll be back with you then. But we'll be back with you on Postgame after the Orange take on Wagner next week. Thanks for hanging with us tonight. This has been a Syracuse Football Postgame presented by Krause Health.